Good afternoon and welcome to 12 and a half minutes, brought to you by Elevator. This is your weekly hit of hope, information and inspiration. My name's Andy Campbell, and each week I get to spend 12 and a half minutes in the company of some of the world's most inspiring people. And there's an old expression out there that you might find some people who know a lot about a little. You might find some people that know a little about a lot, but it's incredibly rare that you find someone that knows a lot about a lot. And that's why I'm delighted that my guest today is someone that does know a lot about a lot. He is a broadcaster, journalist, former TV exec, and now author. I'm delighted to welcome to 12 and a half minutes, the one and only Stuart Cosgrove. Stuart.
Hello there, Andy. Good to see you, and thanks for that inspiring introduction. I know a lot about a lot.
Well, I wanted to keep it short because, Stuart, I mean, I've known you for many, many years, and it's been something that has always struck me about you. There's so many subjects that you can go really, really deep on, Stuart, and you must just absorb information at such a crazy rate.
Well, it's a strange thing. My mother, who's now long since passed away, once said to me, the day that they bury you, you'll push the coffin open and ask the undertaker how he embalms bodies. And to some extent, that's exactly what I would like to do, because I'm a great believer in lifelong learning, that there is so much out there that I want to know across almost every kind of form of culture, of society, of media. So I'm naturally a very inquisitive person, and I love learning. I love learning more than anything in the world. That gives me a thrill.
Oh, absolutely, Stuart. And as I say, it's been something that always sticks with me in those years that I've known you. Now, today we're going to talk about some of your career highlights and some of the most recent activity that you've been in, particularly with the books that you've been writing. But Stuart, I have to confess, you probably know this already, I'm not a football guy, so there'll be no football conversation, I'm afraid, Stuart. And I know that's a subject that's close to your heart, but you're off the hook.
Yeah, arguably it is, yes. I mean, you know, I'm a Scot, so I'm a fan of the Scotland national team, and I'm also a fan of my local club team, St Johnstone, neither of whom would not necessarily test world football in terms of rating. So I don't think we need to worry too much about that.
Well, listen, you might be a fan of one form of Saints. I'm obviously a fan of the other Saints, the Buddies, St Mirren from Paisley. But yeah, best not talking about their performance of recent weeks. But listen, Stuart, what I'd like to do is hand over to you to give us a couple of minutes of an overview, who you are, what you've done, your life to date, some of the background to by way of introduction to yourself. So over to you, Stuart.
Okay, my name's Stuart Cosgrove. I'm born and raised in Perth in Scotland. From a very, very early age, probably around 14, 15-year-old, I fell in love with soul music and the music of Motown in the city of Detroit, which is a passion and a love affair I've kept throughout my life. It's probably one of the greatest kind of consistent passions and interests that I've had forever. When I left school and went to university, I moved to the north of England, to University of Hull, and began to come into contact with the northern soul scene, the kind of underground rare soul scene that was at its very height in the early 70s, but has kind of existed ever since. And as part of that journey, I began to realize that the music that I loved was simply the surface of a much, much bigger story of the music, independent music of Black America. And that's been a kind of lifelong passion. But I started writing for a fanzine on the Northern Soul scene, and through that was kind of elevated and discovered by NME, the major music paper, where I went as a media editor, and I was at NME during one of its kind of most thriving and disputational periods. And because of my visibility at the NME, I started to get more work in television, and ultimately joined Channel 4 as a commissioning editor for independent film and video And I stayed with that channel for the best part of 22 years, working my way up through the organisation to becoming the longest standing commissioning editor and controller of arts and entertainment across a whole range of different genres. Very fond memories. But the one thing that stayed with me and has never left me has been a deep, deep-seated love affair with Scotland, where I was born, where I grew up, and where I never really left in my heart. And going to London was always, for me, you know, a process of when would I return and how would I return. So when I left Channel 4, I'd been travelling up to Scotland every weekend to do the radio show Off the Ball, and I knew that the time would come when I'd be able to convert my Channel 4 life into some form of a pension that would allow me to kind of return home permanently to Scotland. But in order to be able to live my life and be be kind of at times, I'd really like to kind of start living the life of being a writer. Now, to be a writer now, you need a wee bit of money behind you. And I started to write my books, the Soul Trilogy, Detroit 67, Memphis 68, Harlem 69, and most recently, my current book, Cassius X, A Legend in the Making. So that brings us right up to date.
Oh, fantastic, Stuart. And certainly when I guess we knew each other, you were very active within Channel 4 and looking at the programming that was going on, but really immersing yourself very much in Scotland and the creative and cultural scenes within Scotland. And yeah, I guess more broadly, you know, media plays such a large part of our lives, Stuart. And, you know, over your years, you've seen media change in its forms, change in its messages, and changed in the types of people that are utilising media to get their messages out. Be good to get your thoughts on just what you've observed over the last couple of decades, Stuart. Yeah,
well, one of the most obvious points to make there, Andy, is pretty much kind of what we are currently doing just now, because one of the great openings for Scotland has been the growth of digital media. Because, you know, if you go back to the days of what they once called spectrum scarcity, where, you know, the spectrum to be able to broadcast was in the hands of 2 or 3 channels and not many more radio stations, suddenly with the digitization of communication, an opportunity emerged for more and more TV stations to emerge and more radio stations. Once you moved that onto the World Wide Web and communication through Wi-Fi and through broadband and super fast broadband, you created the conditions under which ordinary people could look at broadcasting themselves, whether that was through, you know, standalone offerings like, say, YouTube or Instagram, or whether it was in more sort of sophisticated semi-professional TV setups. So now it would be difficult to list the number of companies I know in Scotland that have got an ambitious kind of way of thinking about how they develop their media footprint. Whereas when I first came home, it was pretty much the independent production companies working for Channel 4 or BBC. I mean, the access into media was so narrow, and I think that's changed. And so in lots of ways, you can actually say that the whole idea of Nike's theory of just do it is the theory that most applies now to media, because the platforms, the apps, the bandwidth is all there for you to go on and broadcast around your passions if you so wish.
Yep, yeah, and that, I mean, that's ultimately a great thing, isn't it? Because there's so many new platforms, new channels for people to broadcast. It gives us a much broader spectrum of flavours, if you like, that's out there. You can really find something to suit everyone, Stuart.
Yeah, you know, it's incredible because, I mean, if you're looking at the low barrier to entry as well, the cost of doing it. I mean, currently we are broadcasting through StreamYard onto some of the live networks, Facebook, Instagram, and you reach an audience and you're producing a relatively professional video stream that people can actually watch. Now, during the pandemic and the coronavirus lockdowns, more and more people were working via Zoom, via StreamYard, via, you know, Microsoft Teams or Google Hangouts and all of these various things. And I think it's probably unintentionally what's come is that because people are having to discover those systems through working remotely, they're also starting to think about what else they could do with it. What other things could they do? What other innovations could they come up with? What other passions can they communicate out to their network? And I think it's quite an exciting period of time in the media.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it brings anything that's happening in the world instantly into your stream. It's immediately there. You pick up Twitter, it's there, whatever is happening on the other side of the world. So you really can't escape that. And of course, I think that hopefully, the multitude of different sources of media really broadens us and our ability to understand what's going out there. But I guess it can have some dangerous consequences if used in the wrong way, Stuart.
Well, I mean, one of the virtues of the old traditional way was that there was a filter. There was only a certain amount of time in the day. There was only a certain amount of people that gained access to commissioning, and there was only a certain amount of money that could be spent on production. Remember, in the old days, even in video production, you still needed a camera, a tripod, a whole set of kind of rigmarole. You needed a crew, you needed lighting, you needed all of these things. And that therefore meant that there was a cost attached. Now, the cost of entry into the market has been crushed right down, whereby you can do it. Now, the downside of that, if you're looking for a downside, is who edits it all and how do you find yourself in the forest of things? So although we're broadcasting just now in StreamYard, the big challenge is how do you get the story out to the many millions of people that may be available to view? And that's one of the big challenges. How do you get noticed in a world of everything?
Yeah. And you've gone back yourself to very traditional means, writing books and being inspired by the media of music, and particularly the campaigns and the political messages that are woven through those platforms, and hence the Soul Trilogy taking you on your book writing journey. Stuart, tell us a little bit more about some of what was the penny dropping moment for you that you needed to start that?
As I was saying earlier, I'd had this love affair all my life. I mean, since I was a teenager. And so in lots of ways, it was always in my life. It was always there. I was always buying records. I was quite a big collector in the Northern Soul scene. I loved the rare music scene. I loved being able to understand more about the artists and the communities, the cities, the production units that they were from. And that was a really, really big love affair for me. But I went to see a movie with my mate, a guy from Perth that I'd grown up with, and it was the story of Dreamgirls, which is the fictionalization of the Supremes in Motown. And there's a scene in which one of the central characters, her name is Effie, the character, and she comes out after having an argument with the label owner and is effectively sacked. And as she comes out, there's all this rioting going on in the streets. And my mate said to me, did Florence Ballard get sacked on the day of the Detroit riots? And I said, I don't know. I've never really thought of that, but I'll go away and find out because I'm an inveterate researcher. So I actually went on that mission to find that out, that answer to that question. And I realized as I was digging deeper and deeper in it, that I was beginning to work out where all the major artists of Detroit were in 1967, the year of the biggest race riots in modern American history, where 42 people died, 1,000 people were seriously injured, and the whole of the inner city of Detroit was laid to waste. And I realized that there was an awful lot going on in that year. And then I started to work on the idea that Detroit in 1967 was going to be a book I passionately wanted to write. And because you know me, Andy, I had to start by saying, and it's a trilogy. And then the other two, and then you start to make the trilogy up. But 1967 was the driver of it. And when I was a young boy, I mean, I'm talking now about being maybe 10-year-old or something like that. I remember being in the kitchen at home and my mum saying to me that the transistor radio was on. She had this tranny radio in the kitchen and she was making toast. And I heard this guy, it was a BBC Scotland news broadcast and they went live to Detroit. And I remember this guy with the American accent saying, "The Motor City is burning. Detroit is on fire." And it stuck with me all my life. And that's kind of, I think, one of the motivations for writing the first book in the trilogy, Detroit 67.
That stuck with you there. And just to quickly come up to your latest book, because I mean, 12 and a half minutes flies over. Cassius X, about Muhammad Ali, 1963. I think you pitched that one when Cassius Clay was 21. Tell us about that book.
I wanted to write effectively a prequel to the trilogy, the earliest days of soul music. And I was thinking of a city, and Miami offered some possibilities. But the real thing that swung it for me was that the young boxer, who then was known as Cassius Marcellus Clay, had arrived in the city of Miami, where his gym was, the Dundee gym, Angelo Dundee's gym in Miami. And the year 1963 was a crucial year where he was preparing for his heavyweight title fight against Sonny Liston. And soul music was coming alive. He befriended Sam Cooke. His girlfriend was the Philadelphia singer Dee Dee Sharp. So it was kind of made for him to be the witness to the emergence of soul music. But of course, as I went on and dug deeper, I'd always made the assumption that he'd converted from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali when he joined the Nation of Islam. But his training to join the Nation of Islam was over nearly a year and a half. And when he'd taken the name Cassius X, much like Malcolm X, the X is about the denial of your slave name, and he had done that as part of the process of his induction into the Nation of Islam. So the book is about the time when he's called Cassius X and all of these various other facets that I've just described.
Oh, fantastic. Stuart, we're out of time, I'm afraid, but it's been a real brilliant journey with you in those 12 and a half minutes to find out more about you, your views on media, and take us right up to speed on your latest book. And presumably it's available at all good bookshops, Stuart?
All good bookshops. It's available online, and it's currently the hardback, but you can also get the ebook, and the paperback will be out for Christmas, Andy.
Oh, fantastic. Well, good plug there. I'm waiting for you to do audible versions of your books. Have you ever thought about that, Stuart?
Well, interestingly enough, Andy, only yesterday I was asked to choose between 3 American actors to do the audible book of Cassius X in the States. Brilliant. And we went with one young man who had just a really, really rich, nice voice. So the book is simultaneously out in America and in Europe, and of course here in the UK. And as far as I understand it, we've just sold the German translational rights. So when it comes out in Germany, it'll be out in German as well as English. So yeah.
Sure, I look forward to downloading that as soon as I can and reading it. So sure, thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you indeed, Andy. Absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Stuart. Bye now. Well, fantastic. So make sure you do pick up a copy of Cassius X at all good bookshops and online. And of course, to Stuart, good luck to St Johnstone this weekend. We'll keep our fingers crossed for you as well. So thanks very much for your time. And just as a reminder, 12 and a half minutes is going out every 2 weeks. So our next programme will be on the 9th of October. So make sure you join us then, Friday at 3 p.m, live on YouTube, Facebook and LinkedIn. I'll be speaking with David Pratt, who is an international war journalist, photographer, broadcaster and author as well, and quite a... Well, 12 and a half minutes would never be enough for most of our guests, and the stories that David will be able to share with us will be certainly insightful into the life that he's lived so far. So please do join us 9th of October. Make sure that you subscribe to our channel on YouTube, follow and like us on Facebook and Twitter. But in the meantime, have a wonderful weekend and be brave.